Throughout time, people across the world told each other tales of how they came to be, of heroes and monsters, romance and tragedy, death and rebirth. Mythology helped shape the ancient world, explaining the unexplainable. This is Mythology Unleashed. Humanity has come up with a number of possibilities as to what happens to us after we die, where our spirit, soul, or consciousness go when our physical bodies have run their course. Many cultures believe that when a person died, their spirit would travel to a realm of the dead, perhaps a paradise where they may rest for all eternity, or a realm of eternal suffering as penance for dishonest deeds performed in life. But one of the most chilling ideas to ever spring from the human mind is the idea of spirits of the dead remaining trapped in the mortal world, manifesting as disembodied apparitions, as ghosts. Stories of ghosts appear in every culture on Earth, going as far back as the Stone Age, and appearing in the earliest of written texts, based around nigh-universal beliefs of a person's spirit existing separately from their body, and continuing to live on after they die. While specific details on ghosts tend to vary from culture to culture, certain aspects remain constant. They are the shades of the deceased represented by a non-corporeal body, one that may even closely resemble their living appearance, or one that may not even be perceived by the living. They are able to interact with the living world and its inhabitants on a limited basis, having restricted ranges or only being able to communicate in certain ways. And most importantly, they are always trapped in the living world for a reason, and often not for a happy reason. Reasons as to why ghosts would remain on Earth instead of moving on to an afterlife often concerns the manner of their death. Those who die violent or tragic deaths were said to return to haunt those responsible, or those who may put others in similar situations, or haunt the living out of a desire for revenge. Many ghost stories feature an apparition coming back to deliver an important message to the living, or to warn them away from danger. Additionally, there are legends and traditions that dictate that the dead can return to the material world during a certain time of year, able to interact with the living and see their legacy, such as the Celtic tradition of Samhain, the predecessor to All Hallows' Eve and modern-day Halloween, and the Hungry Ghost Festival, observed and celebrated in China. More often than not, ghosts themselves are of a tragic nature, and the spirit in question is often mournful, trapped in a never-ending state of anguish. In Mesopotamian lore, in the 12th tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the eponymous hero encounters the ghost of his dear friend Enkidu, and together they reminisce about life and discuss the manner of the afterlife. In Greek mythology, ghosts were often a result of those who could not pay Charon, the boatman who ferried the dead to the realm of Hades, but may also be summoned through means of an oracle or a blood sacrifice, such as in the Odyssey, when the king of Ithaca, Odysseus, summoned the shade of the prophet Tiresias in order to gain information on his perilous return home from Troy. Japanese mythology has the Yurei, ghosts of people who are unable or unwilling to pass on to the next world until a purpose is fulfilled. Irish legend tells of Stingy Jack, who was once a cruel and dishonest man in life, who even managed to make a fool out of the devil himself, barring him from both heaven and hell, and forcing him to wander the earth, forever guided by a light in a carved turnip. His tale influencing today's tradition of jack-o'-lanterns on Halloween. While ghosts are often sorrowful and tragic in nature, There are more than a few examples of a vengeful spirit in legend who terrorizes the living, harassing them, scaring them, and even attacking them with the intent to kill. Nigerian folklore tells of Madame Koi Koi, who haunts school campuses, engaging in poltergeist-like activity and attacking lone students. In Japanese mythology, the Onryo are vengeful spirits of those who had died in an accident, by betrayal, or in battle, and then proceed to take out their rage and pain on the living, often in violent and bloody ways. English folklore has Herne the Hunter, a mysterious antlered figure who rides through Windsor Great Park and causes livestock to produce blood instead of milk. Hindu mythology has the Vatala, a hostile spirit that could take possession of any corpse and cause mayhem from vandalism to miscarriage. Andean mythology of South America has the Hapanunu, ancestral spirits who fly through the night and abduct children to eat. Indonesian folklore claims that women who die in childbirth may return as the kuntilnak, appearing during the full moon to attack pregnant women, devour infants, and vampirically drain the blood of men. Many countries of northern Europe have the Wild Hunt, a procession of spectral hunters on horseback who stampede through the wilds of the world and catch the souls of mortals who witness their hunt, as a hunter would catch a deer. Whether or not a ghost is harmless or malevolent in nature, or if there is a purpose as to why they remain in the realm of the living, many people, to this very day, strongly believe in the existence of ghosts. One could make the very strong argument that ghosts may be the most widely believed in of supernatural anomalies, with alleged sightings and encounters being recorded for millennia. In the 1st century CE, Roman author and statesman Pliny the Younger recorded one of the first notable ghost stories in his letters, telling the story of the specter of an old man with a long beard and rattling chains haunting his house in Athens. Centuries later, in 856 CE, came the first reporting of a poltergeist, detailing how a farmhouse in Germany fell victim to a spirit that would hurl stones and light fires on the property. In the following centuries, practically every place on Earth has had a local legend of a haunting, and for centuries, people have claimed to have come into contact with apparitions of the dead, many of which seem to come in common forms. Souls that were victims of violence and torture are said to haunt places where bloodshed and cruelty took place, such as the Tower of London or Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, one of the premier battlefields of the American Civil War. There are countless legends of the White Lady, beautiful young women who had died due to tragic circumstances and manifest themselves wearing flowing white gowns, such as Latin America's La Llorona and the Philippines' White Lady of Balete Drive in Quezon City. Vanishing hitchhikers are seen haunting roadways at night, hailing down passing cars, and disappearing when someone pulls over to assist. Many ghosts are said to be headless, either carrying their dismembered head in their hands, or eternally searching for it, and in some cases, may even chase down travelers in an attempt to take their heads, such as the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. Ghostly animals are also commonly reported, with such tales as cats that appear and vanish without a trace, phantom horses that trot through fields and suddenly disappear, black dogs that bring about misfortune to those who see them, and even bears that roam desolate forests and charge hikers and hunters. There are even legends of ghost ships such as the Flying Dutchman, and ghost trains like Lincoln's funeral train, doomed to forever repeat their final voyages. Ancient legends and modern reports of ghosts and paranormal occurrences have led to countless studies and investigations to prove whether or not ghosts really exist and manifest in reality, with the results leaning heavily towards non-existence, being labeled as impossible to falsify, and ghost hunting being considered a pseudoscience. Ghosts are some of the most widespread figures of myth and legend, appearing in every single culture on Earth, reflecting a culture's values and their beliefs regarding the afterlife. As a result, ghosts have become the most widely reported paranormal phenomenon in history, with a ghost legend rising from nearly every city in the world. Additionally, ghosts and ghost stories have become staples of horror and fantasy fiction, appearing in countless stories of every entertainment medium. From classic literature, such as the works of Shakespeare and Charles Dickens, to more contemporary stories written by J.R.R. Tolkien and Stephen King, to film and television, including Poltergeist, The Conjuring, Casper, and American Horror Story, just to name a few. Are ghosts truly real? Modern science says no. But there is always something out there, not so easily explained. And whether or not they are truly found in this world, ghosts have been an integral part of human culture since the very beginning, and will likely always have a place within human culture for centuries to come. Humanity has no shortage of monsters and demons lurking in mythology and folklore, created from the dark recesses of imagination and superstition. Some monsters are rather unique to their respective mythologies, such as the Wendigo of Anishinaabe folklore, or the Minotaur of Greek mythology. However, some legends have a blood-curdling way of making their way into the nightmares of people across countless cultures. Such is the case with vampires. Horror fiction of the late 19th century into the modern day portrays vampires as attractive, human-like beings who sleep during the day away from the sunlight and arise at night, prowling urban areas for human victims. When their quarry is seized upon, they bite into their prey's neck with sharp, cruel fangs, draining them of their blood until not a drop is left, effectively killing them. A familiar and chilling tale in horror stories and scary movies. But the vampires of mythology are strikingly different from modern-day Hollywood. As with dragons and giants, nearly every culture on Earth has a blood-sucking being lurking in its folklore, dating back thousands of years. Blood drinking and similar activities were attributed to demons or spirits who would dine on human flesh and blood. Even the Christian devil was considered synonymous with the vampire. Almost every culture in the world associated blood drinking with some kind of revenant or demon, or in some cases a deity. In Greek mythology, the monstrous Lamia was said to attack children during the night, drinking their blood before devouring the remains. Chinese mythology tells of the Chongxi, the hopping vampire, which resembles a corpse stricken with rigor mortis, dressed in Mandarin attire with arms stretched out, who drains its victims not only of their blood, but their very qi, or life force. In Akan mythology of Ghana and Togo lurks the Asanbosam, or Sansabosam, bat-like humanoids who feed on the blood of people and animals who stray into their territory. Philippine mythology has the Manananggal, another bat-like humanoid creature that separates from its lower half and flies through the night on large, bat-like wings, searching for pregnant women to suck out their blood, as well as unborn fetuses. The Dracula of Irish mythology appears as a beautiful young woman who seduces men before killing them and drinking their blood. Folktales from Central and South America have El Chupacabras, near alien-looking monsters that prowl ranches for the blood of livestock. Slavic mythology has the Striga, a reanimated corpse that flies through the night and consumes the blood and entrails of the living. Folklore from Aboriginal Australia has the Yaramayahu, a small, red-furred creature who ambushes unsuspecting people and strategically drains their blood through suctions on their fingers and toes. These few examples of vampiric monsters are but a taste of the many legends to have been told throughout the centuries. So diverse are they in their appearance and their characteristics that to name a collection of definitive traits would be next to impossible. However, the sole trait that unites them all is their consumption of human and animal blood. The creatures we identify with vampires today are rooted almost exclusively in early 18th century southeastern Europe, when oral traditions of many ethnic groups of the region were recorded and published, and when superstition ruled over reason. In most cases, vampires were revenants of evil beings, suicide victims, or witches, yet may also be created by a malevolent spirit possessing a corpse, by being bitten by a vampire, or by drinking vampiric blood. Belief in vampires became so pervasive in Europe that in some areas it caused mass hysteria and even public executions of people believed to be vampires. A multitude of different theories have arisen to explain where the vampire legends and subsequent hysteria may have begun, particularly centered around misunderstanding of how bodies decompose. As a corpse's skin decomposes and shrinks, its teeth and fingernails can appear to have grown longer, appearing as fangs or claws to the superstitious. As internal organs break down, a dark purge fluid can leak out of the nose and mouth. Those unfamiliar with this process could interpret this fluid to be blood, and suspect that the corpse had been drinking it from the living. But bloody corpses with long hair and nails were not the only cause for suspicion. During the late Middle Ages, Europe had been stricken with bouts of the Black Death, bubonic plague that ravaged the continent. Before people understood how certain disease spread, they sometimes imagined vampires and other demons were behind the unseen forces slowly ravaging their communities. Trying to kill vampires, or prevent them from feeding, was a way for people to feel as though they had some control over disease. And so came various practices or rituals to keep vampires away, and the dead from returning as one of them. Some methods included severing the head from the body, even turning it around, severing limbs, placing a brick in the mouth, placing iron needles in the heart, or burying the corpse with a sickle over its throat. Fear of vampires fueled the superstitious folk, leading to methods of protection against them, and if need be, to kill them. Some legends, and much of common horror fiction for that matter, claim that vampires cannot abide sunlight, either weakening them severely, or burning them to a pile of dust. Being demonic and unholy in nature, vampires could be repelled by holy relics and symbols. The cross could hold them at bay, biblical scripture read aloud would cause them pain, and contact with holy water or holy wafers would burn their flesh. In addition, they are said to be unable to walk on hallowed ground or cross running water. Garlic and other aromatic plants were said to keep vampires away, stemming from garlic's use in folk medicine. In order to kill a vampire, one must drive a stake through their heart, behead them, or burn them, though some traditions may call for any combination of the three. It is also said that weapons of iron or silver, both considered pure metals blessed by heaven, are rather effective against the undead. With these superstitions held as firm belief, the Western world became flooded with stories of people dying and allegedly rising from the grave, stories of supposed hunters killing suspected vampires, and the exhuming and desecration of corpses believed to be cursed. But vampire lore would soon change forever with the publications of Gothic Romantic European literature of the 18th and 19th centuries, about the time vampire hysteria was peaking in Europe. Vampiric figures appeared in 18th century poetry, such as Heinrich August Ossenfelder's Der Vampir, about a seemingly vampiric narrator who seduces an innocent maiden. The first prose vampire story published in English is believed to be John Polidori's The Vampire in 1819, about a mysterious aristocrat named Lord Ruthven, who seduces young women, only to drain them of their blood and vanish without a trace. In 1872 came the novella Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu, about a young woman who is preyed upon by a female vampire. In 1897, Irish author Bram Stoker released the consummate vampire tale, Dracula, the story of a 400-year-old vampiric count of Transylvania, loosely based upon old vampire legends and the historical Vlad Tepes III, better known as Vlad the Impaler. From Bram Stoker, particularly through his character of Professor Abraham Van Helsing, we received the solidified traits, powers, and weaknesses that would come to define the vampire in Western popular culture. Vampires were cemented as people who had died and later rose from the grave, and continued to live their undead life through the consumption of human blood. They became almost fully nocturnal, sleeping during the day in coffins, often filled with the soil of their homeland. They could not cross running water, enter a home without spoken permission, cast a natural shadow or a reflection in mirrors. They could not appear on film or withstand the presence of garlic. Vampires were given the powers of superhuman strength and speed, heightened senses, hypnotic capabilities, the ability to defy gravity, and the power to shapeshift into bats, wolves, rodents, or even mist. And with these powers came well-established weaknesses of sunlight, fire, holy relics, and they could be killed by decapitation and by a stake driven through the heart. But Dracula not only re-established the vampire's inherent attributes spoken of in mythology, but their overall appearance and disposition as well. Rather than the walking corpse and demonic-looking creature that they were portrayed as in mythology, vampires would become much more human-looking, and would almost always be aesthetically very attractive, alluring to their would-be victims. Or at the very least, would come across as much more unassuming, perhaps allowing them to approach prey more easily. Additionally, they would develop individual personality traits that their folklore counterparts, and many mythical monsters in general, would lack. Whereas the vampires of Eastern European folklore were mindless and rather animal-like, Count Dracula was intelligent, charming, with impeccable manners and good breeding, and he was more than capable of showing love, remorse, pleasure, hate, vengeance, and even fear. As time would go on, the vampire would gradually evolve in literature, movies, comic books, and games. And with each new iteration of the vampire, something new would be brought to the table. In Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles, we see a more personal side to the vampires, with the tragic protagonist Louis shown constantly at odds with his thirst for blood and holding on to what remains of his humanity. In the Underworld and Blade franchises, we see vampires, both good and evil, in more action-based roles, even experimenting with ideas of characters who are half vampire and half human, or even half vampire and half werewolf. The comic book and movie 30 Days of Night brought vampires back to their mythological roots of being terrifying, killing machines, birthed by infection, and driven by bloodlust. There are countless more works of fiction centered around vampires, and though they all may differ in appearance, personality, even power and weakness, all owe their thanks to the vampire legends of old. The mythology surrounding vampires is truly a fascinating one, and one that is spread far across the world. Though the vampire may come in many shapes and sizes, the terror and subsequent thrill that ekes from their legend has intrigued the minds of people for countless generations. From ancient mythology, to medieval superstition, to the printed page and the silver screen, vampires have arguably become the most popular monster in the horror genre, and one of the most enduring monsters ever to spring forth from mythology. Picture, if you will, the sun sets at the end of a day. Night falls and a full moon rises, dousing the dark earth with silver light. A cry of pain echoes throughout the night. A poor soul is changing into something terrible. Their bones break and reshape. Coarse fur grows and covers their flesh. Razor-sharp claws sprout from the fingertips. Their teeth sharpen to points. Their face turns beastly. Once the horrific transformation is complete, the creature emits a howl unlike any other that makes the blood run cold. This is the werewolf. A staple of horror and dark fantasy stories, the werewolf is an impressive monster. Great size, overwhelming strength and speed, boundless stamina, sharp senses, even sharper claws and teeth, an appetite for man and beast alike, and immunity to most physical attacks make for a truly fearsome threat. There are a number of ways to become a werewolf, such as being cursed by a sorcerer or shaman, wearing enchanted pelts or clothing, drinking a potion or rubbing a magic ointment on the skin, drinking water from a wolf's paw print, sleeping under a full moon, having werewolf parents, and most commonly, being bitten by one and surviving. Once a werewolf, the mortal is forever cursed to wander the world, immune to age and disease, and committing acts of brutality on all that they encounter. A person's only salvation from the wrath of the beast is the wolfsbane plant to ward it away, and a silver bullet to end the monster's life. Upon its death, the werewolf will revert back to its human form. Werewolves are among the most popular monsters of legend, but where did the myths of werewolves begin? Since perhaps the late Stone Age, tales of human beings transforming into animals have been found all over the world, from Europe and Asia to Africa and the Americas. In the Northern Hemisphere, wolves are among the top predators of their ecosystems, naturally gifted with great strength, endurance, and senses, as well as cultural associations with gluttony, greed, malice, and brutality. Wolves invoked a sense of awe and fear among ancient peoples. If a person were to shapeshift into a wolf, or a man-wolf hybrid, it could make them an excellent hunter and combatant. But the idea of animal strength and savagery crossing with the calculation and emotion of a human being was especially terrifying. To become an animal, namely one as powerful and feared as a wolf, was seen as an exit from civilization and entering a primal state of chaos. Unchecked morality and unbridled cruelty would be strengthened by a wolf's natural power. Their enemies would be torn asunder. The earliest stories of werewolves reflect this deep-rooted fear of regression of civilization into animal savagery. The oldest recorded tale of a person changing into a wolf comes from Mesopotamian mythology, in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Here, instead of a voluntary shift from man to wolf, a woman cursed an ex-lover, transforming him forever into a wolf. In Greek mythology, a corrupt king named Lycaon attempted to trick Zeus into eating the flesh of a slaughtered child. Outraged by this barbarism, Zeus transformed Lycaon and all of his kin into wolves. From the story of Lycaon comes the word lycanthropy, which defines the supernatural power, or psychological condition of belief, to transform into a wolf-like monster. In addition, Lycaon's story contains all the elements of a modern werewolf tale: immoral behavior, murder, and cannibalism. In 425 BCE, Greek historian Herodotus described the Neurians, a nomadic tribe of magical men who changed into wolf form for several days of the year. Roman satirist Petronius wrote of a soldier who witnessed his companion shift into a wolf under the light of a full moon, before running off into the darkness. In Norse mythology, the Volsunga sagas tell of a father and son, Sigmund and Sinfjotli, who used magic pelts to transform themselves into large wolves over the course of 10 days. For the duration of these 10 days, they proceeded to embark on a bloody rampage, killing all in their path, until the father viciously maimed his own son during a disagreement. The story ends with Sinfjotli being healed by a raven, and on the 10th day, the father and son shed their pelts and burned them, ridding themselves of the curse. The cautionary tale of Little Red Riding Hood is often interpreted as a werewolf story, as the wolf who preys on the titular character is cunning and capable of disguising himself as a human in order to devour the young girl. A Blackfoot legend tells of a man who was left for dead by his wives, but rescued by a pack of wolves. The pack's alpha bestowed upon him a wolf-like appearance, and together with the wolves, this wolfman sought revenge against his wives by raiding the settlement and stealing from food storage. From Cajun folklore of Louisiana come tales of the Rougarou, or Loup-garou, a person who becomes a werewolf after being bewitched or failing to observe Lent for 7 years in a row, and transforms into the murderous beast every night for 101 days, before the curse is passed to another by way of biting or clawing. Many of these stories, as well as the many other stories of werewolves and wolfmen, share common themes. Transformation of man to beast, acts of savagery, cruelty, rage, evil, murder, and the consumption of human beings. These stories are seen as fictional today, but in the distant past, stories of werewolves were seen as all too real. Superstitions of werewolves and other creatures and wicked beings would lead to mass hysteria. During the High Middle Ages and into the 16th century, amidst the witch trials and religious persecution of Europe, thousands of people were accused, tried, tortured, and executed for allegedly being werewolves. These so-called werewolf trials lend a historic glimpse at rampant human belief in werewolves. Telltale signs of a werewolf in human form included eyebrows that connected, rough or hairy palms, red hair, or being a societal outcast. Some of the accused were arrested because villagers and peasants needed scapegoats for dead livestock or other societal ills. But others were accused because of actions far more sinister. In the 1500s, Frenchmen Pierre Burgot and Michel Verdun allegedly swore allegiance to the devil and claimed to have an ointment that turned them into wolves. After confessing to brutally murdering several children, they were both burnt to death at the stake. Another Frenchman of the same era was Gilles Garnier, dubbed the Werewolf of Dole, who also claimed to transform via an ointment, after which he killed and ate children in the form of a wolf. As with Burgot and Verdun, Garnier was burned at the stake. Whether Burgot, Verdun, or Garnier were mentally ill, acted under the influence of hallucinogens, or were simply cold-blooded killers, is up for debate. But it likely did not matter to superstitions of Europeans at the time, for in their minds, such heinous crimes could only be committed by a horrific beast such as a werewolf. Much of what is common in werewolf mythology today comes from the realm of Hollywood movies, particularly 1941's The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr. The concept of changing form under the light of the full moon is rooted in folklore, but was cemented thanks to this film. Becoming a werewolf after being bitten by one comes directly from Hollywood, for in folklore, one became a werewolf by other mystical means, and a werewolf simply mauled and devoured its victims. The power of silver weapons, namely silver bullets, being lethal to the monster became a staple of werewolf beliefs. And from the Wolfman comes the chilling poem forever associated with werewolf lore.
Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfsbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright.
As the horror movie industry progressed, more films about the werewolf came about, such as 1981's An American Werewolf in London, which focused on the psychological aspect of being a werewolf, and The Howling, which explored the raw sexuality of a savage beast. Other films, such as Van Helsing or the Underworld series, put them in antagonistic roles against keen monster hunters, or in opposition against covens of vampires. In recent decades, werewolves have appeared in countless works of fiction, such as books, films, and even comics. As a result, werewolves have become increasingly popular among horror fans. This may be perhaps because, unlike other monsters, the werewolf is only a monster for a short while, and is a normal human being at all other points. Furthermore, unlike ghosts, vampires, or zombies, who still maintain a human-like appearance, the werewolf turns into something much more beastly in appearance, adding an additional sense of intrigue and terror. For as long as recorded stories have existed, stories of werewolves have haunted the nightmares of people around the world. The sheer image of a person painfully shapeshifting into a ravenous wolf and prowling in the shadows of the moonlit night strikes deep within the hearts of millions. From ancient mythology to medieval superstition to Hollywood cinema, the werewolf has cemented itself as among the most terrifying and most enduring monsters of mythology. The undead, the deceased returning to the land of the living, a concept found in nearly every ancient culture, comes in a multitude of forms. Sometimes they may appear as a ghost, the non-corporeal shade of a person that never made it to the next world. Sometimes they may appear as a vampire with a physical body needed to be sustained by the blood of the living. And then there are some forms of the undead that are simply a reanimated corpse, with no remnants of the person that they once were. The latter has gone by a number of names across time, but are commonly referred to as zombies. In horror fiction of the late 20th century and early 21st century, zombies are depicted as slow-moving, moaning, decaying bodies staggering around, birthed by evil magic, waves of radiation, or an infectious plague. They have no mind of their own, no will of their own, no other purpose than to consume the flesh of the living. Though they lack any tactical ability, and are relatively easy to defeat in a one-on-one confrontation, a zombie's true strength lies in the numbers of its horde, and its superhuman ability to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacle. While zombies have earned worldwide renown in books, movies, television, and other media, the zombie of folklore was noticeably different from its popular depiction. Our modern term for zombie, meaning animated corpse, comes from the Vodou religious practices of Haiti, rooted in spiritual traditions from West Africa. It is said that Vodou zombies are created by malevolent practitioners called Bokors, with the intent on making them their servants. The zombies of Haitian lore can either be a living person with their free will taken by mystical means or powerful toxins, or a freshly deceased corpse revived through necromancy. It is important to note that the original zombies of Vodou belief look nothing like their modern depictions. Rather than a decomposing body, they appear as ordinary people, at least on the outside. They are a shell, without free will, without emotion, and are unable to feel pain. They are mindless workers, completely subservient to their masters. They may be put to work doing menial labor or household chores, or may be set upon more devious tasks such as theft, vandalism, even murder. Some say that to protect oneself against a zombie was with the use of salt, sending it back to its grave, or snapping a person out of their trance. Zombification served as an allegory for themes such as colonialism, imperialism, and oppression. For it was seen as a fate worse than death, to lose both spirit and body to slavery and imprisonment. Though different from the modern iteration we identify with as zombies, voodoo zombies possess the same traits of a body stripped of emotion and will, a stiff, jerky locomotion, and the blurred lines between the living and the dead. The modern iteration of zombies, appearing in hordes hell-bent on feasting on the living, owes its origin to George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Released in 1968, Romero managed to rewrite the entire book on zombies with this groundbreaking movie, turning them into an inexplicable monster of the apocalypse, mirroring primal fears of societal downfall that many people across the world had amidst the political and social revolution of the late 1960s. In works of fiction following the 1960s, zombies would continue to feature in works of apocalyptic horror, acting as a constant threat in a world where civilization is shattered, and survival is crucial, yet not guaranteed. Like the undead revenants of folklore, more often than not zombies lack all trace of personality or will, outside of the instinctual consumption of human flesh. They are shown in varying degrees of decay, often slowly moving towards potential prey in hordes of dozens, washing over the land like swarms of locusts, devouring anything that strays into their path. How a person becomes a zombie, though it varies by story, is most often in the form of a contagion that is spread through transfer of bodily fluids, namely blood or saliva. To be bitten by a zombie is almost guaranteed to cause a human to turn into one, not unlike stories of vampires or werewolves. In most cases, the only sure way to kill a zombie is to destroy the brain, as it is the only thing keeping them moving. Attacks to the body or even a decapitation would be rendered useless, as the zombie's other organs no longer function, nor can it feel any pain. Its limited cognitive functions do not allow it to perceive threats, or to ever stop in its pursuit. A zombie will continue its carnivorous onslaught until either it is completely decayed, or it is destroyed. A single zombie may not prove too great a threat, but horror fiction often depicts zombies congregating in massive hordes of dozens, sometimes even hundreds or thousands. A zombie horde can easily decimate a city, not too dissimilar to an invading army, and those who shelter in place may find themselves surrounded by the moaning fiends, who are unaware that they are effectively laying siege. And so the zombie's horror extends beyond the repulsion of a mobile carcass, or threat of being eaten, but to fears of being invaded, overtaken, even trapped. The theme of battling zombies is prevalent in many works of fiction. Following in the footsteps of Romero's films, works such as 28 Days Later and World War Z center around a world ravaged by a zombie outbreak and trying to regain civilization. In the Resident Evil franchise, zombies are a result of experiments in biological warfare by a corrupt pharmaceutical company that the protagonists must battle to stop. In the comic book series and later smash hit television series The Walking Dead, characters Rick Grimes, Daryl Dixon, and other survivors of a viral pandemic must learn to survive against zombies, or walkers as they are called, as well as hostile survivors after the American government crumbled under the rise of the undead. Though there are countless iterations of the undead in mythology and folklore, and zombies are neither particularly unique nor powerful on their own when compared to other monsters, they do have an astounding effect on people. Perhaps this is because zombies manage to represent so much of what humans are afraid of and repulsed by. The concepts of losing oneself, the dead returning, decay, plague, pestilence, invasion, siege, cannibalism, and the very collapse of society are all embodied in the rotting form of a zombie horde. The idea of an unfeeling and unthinking creature that resembles a person falling to pieces, relentlessly pursuing its quarry, no matter the obstacle, and often in a huge group, sinks its teeth deep into the dark imagination of people all across the world.